Well, hello scrappers, Mike here. Welcome back to my channel. And today, I'm going to start a video, it may end up being a series of videos, on processing the contents of my stock pot. I don't do this very often. I'm not sure I've filmed it in the past. I got like 600 videos on YouTube. I'd have to go review and see if I've done anything on stock pot before. I don't remember. But it's about time. I don't do this very often because I don't process as much material as some other YouTubers do. So I know generally it takes a few years before enough material accumulates in my stock pot to make it worthwhile. I'll give you a quick look in the stock pot here. It's got some rocks loosely holding the lid on because normally I am running an air bubbler in the stock pot through this tube to keep the liquid circulating. Well, I turned the bubbler off, better part of a week ago, and it's been several weeks since my last addition to this stock pot. So this is ready to be processed. So a quick review of what a stock pot is. This is where I put all of the liquids left over from my gold recovery. Basically, after I precipitate all the gold out of an aqua regia solution or something, the leftover solution will go in there, okay? I keep copper in there. Any gold or precious metals left in that solution will cement out on the copper and wind up as a black mud in the bottom of this bucket. I keep air bubbling through it to keep the liquid circulating. You have to do that or the copper that you put in there can get a passivated coating on it and not work anymore. But I want to get all of the remaining precious metals out of this liquid before I do what I'm going to do next with it, which is siphon this liquid off into my waste bucket. You don't want to siphon liquid into your waste bucket that still has precious metals in it, okay? So you want them to all cement out. And you want to stop the bubbling a few days at least, or a week, before you actually siphon the liquid over, so the really fine particles in the liquid have a chance to settle to the bottom and you're not siphoning precious metals over into your waste bucket. Okay, so that's the next step. I'm going to take this over to where my waste bucket is, and we're going to siphon most of the remaining liquid out of here. Not all of it, but most of it. So a quick review of what's going on over here. This is all part of my waste processing system. If you're going to do this, recover gold and precious metals from e-waste, you're going to produce a lot of liquid waste. It's highly acidic. It's full of toxic heavy metals. You have to treat it. You can't just pour it down the drain. You can't pour it on the ground. You can't pour it in the ditch out by the street. You've got to treat it, okay? And you want to get the last of the precious metals out of it before you treat it, all right? So it's a several step process. So we've already talked about the stock pot here, which has copper in it to precipitate out any precious metals remaining in this liquid. As a result, copper goes into solution. So the liquid in here is full of copper. It's very saturated with copper. This bucket is my waste bucket. In this bucket, I keep iron and steel, okay? Scrap iron and steel. And when the stock pot liquid goes into the waste bucket, what happens is the copper precipitates out or cements out on the steel. You can see how the steel is all coated with copper in there. I hope that's showing up. And the iron goes into solution. Iron is a lot less toxic than copper and any other heavy metals that are coming over from the stock pot. So iron is a whole lot less toxic, and it's very easy to treat this fluid that comes out of this bucket here to precipitate the iron as an insoluble hydroxide. I have a video on that. I'll put a link in the upper right. You can check that out. And you know that solid sludge can go in your solid waste, and then you've got a liquid once you adjust its pH that you can pour down the drain. It's perfectly harmless. But you don't want to just pour the stuff from your stock pot down the drain. You don't want to pour the stuff out of your waste bucket straight down the drain. That's just nasty, okay? Won't do your piping any good, and it'll probably get you in trouble with the local authorities wherever you live. Now, copper builds up in this waste bucket, cement copper. In fact, this is my new waste bucket. My old waste bucket, over here, is absolutely, well, about half full of cement copper. I've pulled the big pieces of steel out and transferred them to the other bucket. and put some fresh steel in the other bucket. But that's all cement copper right there. That's all copper. And in a future video, I will melt this down and make some copper bars. And what I'll probably do with those copper bars is just hang them inside my stock pot so that they can precipitate out more precious metals into the stock pot, dissolve, and I'll get the copper back when it goes back into the waste bucket. I just have to keep the waste bucket full of scrap iron, which is easy to come by and cheap. So I'll have sort of a circular recycling system here. So that's kind of my goal, circular recycling system. I do have another video in the past where I've taken some of this cement copper and poured bars, and I'll put a link to that in the upper right if you want to check that out too. And I may do some of that in the future, pour bars, hang them in there, and if I have extra copper, well, I'll just take the copper bars I poured to the scrapyard and sell them. Copper's worth a lot of money. Okay, so the next step in this process is I need to get most of the remaining liquid out of the stock pot. All right, so I'm just going to siphon it out. Get my siphon going here. I believe I've made enough room in the waste bucket for this. Got to be a little bit careful here. I don't want to suck the solids up off the bottom of this bucket. So I'm going to put the hose in until it's a little off the bottom. I'm not going to try and get all of the liquid out of the stock pot. I'm just going to try and get most of it out, okay? So we will just let this siphon until most of the liquid is out of my stock pot. Well, it looks like, I guess, just about perfectly right, because we had just enough room in my waste bucket to get the liquid, most of the liquid off of here. Down at the bottom, which I can't really see very well in the bucket in this bright light out here on the viewfinder, but you can see some of the copper wire I've been putting in there to precipitate out the precious metals. I lucked into a lot of copper wire recently because there was a construction project going on next door and they threw a lot of wire out. So I just stripped it and used it in here. There's also a few little ingots that have fallen to the bottom and some pieces, it looks like left over from some copper pipe I'd put in there. But yeah, so that mud in the bottom, that's what we're after. Let's go over to the bench and decide what to do with this mud next. All right, so now we've got the mud up here on the workbench. Let me talk a little bit about what my goals are here and how I'm going to process it, okay? My main goal is to get the gold out of here, all right? Now, I have processed my stock pot in the past and gotten gold out of it, but it didn't look like there were enough like PGMs, platinum group metals in there to worry about going after. I'm not a huge refiner like some people are, so, and I don't deal with a lot of jewelry like some people do. So there's probably not a whole lot of platinum group metals in here. Now, on the other hand, every time I've processed my stock pot in the past, I've gotten the gold out and put what was left over back in the stock pot. So those PGMs have been building up for years and years. So eventually, there probably will be enough in here to make it worthwhile to recover them. So we'll see. But again, job one here, goal one, is to get the gold out of here, however much gold is in there. All right. How am I going to do it? Well, basically, C.M. Hoke's book is the Bible. She has an entire chapter on dealing with your stock pot. And in other chapters, there are like addendums and alternative methods you can use for dealing with the stock pot. So she's got a lot of info on the stock pot in her book. And I'm going to be following the book for a lot of this. Not 100%, but for a lot of it. Her stockpot chapter mainly deals with getting the PGMs out of your stockpot. And like I said, there's probably not a whole lot of PGMs in here. Maybe there are this time. We'll find out. But there might not be. So I'm going to go for the gold first, and then we'll see if there's any PGMs in here worth going after. So I'm going to improvise a little bit. I'm not going to follow her methods 100%. But basically, it's going to be a lot of hope involved in doing this. So, you know, hey, I'm going to put a link in the video description to where you can get a copy of her book. Really, if you're going to get into refining, it's a good place to start. There's a lot of good practical information there. I mean, she did her work 19th, early 20th century. So, you know, you don't have to have a lot of high-tech equipment. to follow her methods and recover gold and precious metals. So anyway, so that being said, let me get set up so that we can get started. The next step is going to be to rough filter the stuff in here. Just get the big chunks of copper out of it. And then later we'll filter it to a much finer level and get the smaller chunks of copper and debris out. So let me get set up and we'll get started. All right. Next operation, I need to filter the big chunks of copper out of what's left in here. I'm going to transfer it to the smaller bucket through this colander right here. And this will get out the bigger pieces of copper that are left in here. I will run this through a finer sieve later, but I just want to get the big pieces out right now. I'm afraid some of this stuff in here might punch holes or just punch right through my smaller sieve that I'm going to use later. So I'm going to get the big pieces out. Now, this operation is not going to be able to fit inside my fume hood. I'm going to have to do it out here in the open air. And I'm going to rinse the stuff out of the stock pot using hydrochloric acid. Why hydrochloric acid instead of water? Well, this has been a very acidic environment in the stock pot the whole time. And there's going to be a lot of metals in solution in the remaining liquid in there. Now, if you add a lot of, say, distilled water to this, you're going to bring the pH up. Right now, the pH is down near 0 in there. If you add a lot of distilled water to it, you're going to bring the pH up, and you could bring it up to the point where a lot of those dissolved metals in there decide to come out of solution as oxides or hydroxides. We don't want that. So I'm going to wash this stuff out of there with a stream of hydrochloric acid from this wash bottle. I'm going to be wearing a full face respirator while I'm doing this with NIOSH approved filters for removing hydrogen chloride fumes, so I don't have to breathe them since I can't do this in my fume hood. So you might not be able to hear me very well. I might do a voiceover if there's anything that needs to be said while I'm doing this. The full face mask will also protect my eyes in case there's any splashing while I'm squirting the hydrogen chloride around. I don't want to get that in my eyes. Don't want to go blind today. Got things I need to see later. Okay, so let me reposition the camera a little bit and we'll get this show on the road. Okay, here we go. I don't know how well you can see up in the bucket there. Yeah, those are some ingots that fell down to the bottom. I got to find a better way to hang them in there so they don't fall off. But yet, this black mud, this is what we want. I don't know if it's showing up at all in there, but this black mud is what we want. And those ingots and some of these sharp pieces of copper are what I was afraid might punch holes in my other sieves, so we're going to do it this way to start with. Alright, it's coming out pretty good. Some more copper, black mud out of here. Gloves that come further up my arms would not necessarily be a bad thing. I'm glad I only have to do this every couple of years. Getting it all over the handle of the bucket, which is not good. It's going to rot out. That's pretty good. I mean, I don't have all of it, but this is going to go right back in service as a stock pot, so anything that doesn't come out is fine. All right, that's pretty clean. Not 100%, but pretty clean. And here is a lot of the copper. Oh, I've got to refill my spritzer. But there's the copper that hadn't dissolved yet. Some wire, some ingots in there. I hope they're showing up. All right, so let me refill my spritzer, and I'll finish cleaning that off. Okay, I can't emphasize enough the need to wear proper safety equipment. Looking at the face mask in front of my respirator here, I can see little drops and spots that have splattered up. I would not have wanted that on my face, around my eyes, nose, whatever. So I'll have to clean this up before I put it away. I'm going to switch at this point to using water, distilled water. I have put probably a liter of hydrochloric acid in this bucket, so the pH in there is going to stay really low, just while I use a little bit of water here to clean the rest of this stuff off. I don't want to create a whole lot of waste here. Now, those of you who watch a lot of different refining channels, okay, you're going to see that I'm doing this a little differently than some other people do it. All right, that's pretty good. That's fairly clean copper. I'm just going to put this right back in here. Wash the rest of this black mud out of my colander. There's a piece of copper that needs to go in there. Yeah, I'm going to do this a little different. And as we go, I'll explain what I'm doing different and why I'm doing it my way, all right? And like I said, we're going to filter this again with a much finer mesh to try and get out like these little pieces of copper, like right here, and some other debris that's in here that I don't know what it is or where it came from. But this stock pot has been in use for years now, so who knows what in the world has happened in there in that time. So let me finish cleaning out this colander. Oh, and by the way, to get the bottom of the bucket, a lot of the black mud was stuck to the bottom of the bucket, so I found a plastic putty knife and I used it to loosen it up before finally washing it out with the HCl. So that might be a handy trick for you too if you're doing this. So let me finish cleaning this up and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, for the next step, we're going to filter this through a much finer mesh. I've got a kitchen filter here. Now this has plastic mesh on it. It's not super fine, but it's going to get rid of a lot of the crud that we don't want to deal with, and a lot of little pieces of copper we don't want to have to dissolve in nitric acid. So, but I'm using plastic mesh. You don't really want to use metal mesh for this. I suppose you could, but a lot of the metal that's in solution in the liquid in here will plate out on like stainless steel mesh when it's going through here. So I'm just going to use plastic so I don't have to deal with that. Probably mostly what will plate out would be copper, but you don't want to have any of your precious metals plate out on your mesh sieve there. So I'm just going to use plastic one. Got more muriatic acid in here to use to help stuff come out of the bucket. So that means the respirator's going back on. So let me get the respirator on and we will get busy here. All right. Get the liquid through here, and then we'll deal with the solids. Here's our lovely black mud. I may need that spatula again. Some of it wants to stick to the bottom here. Or putty knife, I mean. Yeah, some of this stuff's just tenacious. It does not want to come out of the bucket. Come on, everybody into the pool. No holdout. Yeah, I'm probably going to have to get that putty knife and scrape some of this stuff off the bottom. And I might need to find a small paintbrush to help work some of this stuff through the mesh here too. Well, let me do that. Okay, I've been scraping at this stuff in here. That's got it a lot better. Yeah, that's about got it. Okay. That's a pretty clean bucket. I don't know what some of this stuff is. It doesn't want to go through the filter. But, well, I don't know where my little baggie of artist-sized paintbrushes went. I can't seem to find it, and my glasses were fogging up inside the respirator. So we'll just try getting this stuff through with some water. Again, I've got so much hydrochloric acid in here now that I don't think I have to worry about the pH of this stuff rising too much with a little bit of water going in. Just wash the black mud off of this debris. What this debris is, I am not certain. Or how it came to be in the stock pot. Really don't know. Know what it is. Huh. Still a little bit of black mud there. Okay, I guess that's pretty good. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece of paper towel. I'm going to wipe out the inside of this bucket. Get any remaining black mud from in there or from the outside. Because remember, this mud all contains precious metals. Don't leave any of it behind. I'm going to wipe up the stains on the bench top with this piece. And I'm going to put this with my rags and filters to process with the rags and filters the next time I process them to recover gold. All right? And there we have all of our values from the stock pot. Let me wash everything down. Okay. Next, we're going to let this settle. Okay, we're just going to let it settle. It's probably going to take a while, maybe even a day or two. Get all of the solids down at the bottom, and then we can decant off this liquid. All right, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, it's been not quite 24 hours, and the liquid has had a chance to settle. And you can see here, I'll zoom in on it so you can see a little bit better. You can see the layer of solid material that we've got down at the bottom of the beaker there. Okay, that's the stuff we want to process to try and get our gold and other precious metals out of it. And there's a lot of it there. I was not expecting there to be about 250 milliliters of solids. I guess I need to process my stockpot more often than I do. I may have to divide this up into several batches to process it, because that's a lot of material. So what's the next step, you might ask? Well, I am going to siphon off this very dark green liquid off the top of the solids. Now, if you watch some other YouTubers, you may see that they're going to give their stockpot solids multiple boils in muriatic acid and distilled water to try and clean them up, clarify them. They want to get a clean, clear liquid off at the end. I'm not going to do that. A couple of reasons. As far as I'm concerned, clarifying the liquid just means getting rid of the finer particles. And those finer particles, well, they're precious metals. That's what you're there to process. So why get rid of it? You know, why put it back into your stock pot just to kick the problem down the road to the future? So I'm going to process all this at once. So I won't be clarifying it. And also, I don't want to create gallons of unnecessary waste liquid that has to go back into my stock pot. So that's another reason for not clarifying the liquid. What I will do after I decant off or siphon off the bulk of this liquid is I will give it a couple of rinses with muriatic acid, you know, about 1,500 milliliters worth, to try and get as much of this green copper chloride out of here as I can, just so I have less of it to deal with later down the road. But I'm not going to go to the trouble of trying to boil it and clarify it. So that's just unnecessary in my humble opinion and generates way too much waste. So I'll show you that step when I get to it, but first let me get set up to siphon this liquid off. Okay, so here we go with the siphoning. So I'm going to siphon this green liquid off into my temporary stock pot, which is a 5-gallon bucket here. And those of you who have been watching this channel for a while, you may be thinking, wow, he's scaling up some. This temporary stock pot used to be a pitcher, then it was a 2.5-gallon bucket, and now it's a 5-gallon bucket. And you're right, I found that all those things have gotten too small over time, so I've scaled up. But for those of you who maybe have not seen many of my videos before, the reason I use a temporary stock pot, I just let this stuff sit in here until the bucket's, 3/4 full or so, then I'll dump the liquid off into the main stock pot. And the reason is all my gold recovery fluids go into the temporary stock pot, and a little bit of gold will continue to precipitate out over time, or there might be a little bit of gold caught in the water column that hasn't settled out yet, fine gold. And it's much easier to get out of the bottom of this than it is out of the main stock pot. You see what I'm going through to get the stuff out of the main stock pot. With this one, I just have to dump the liquid off and then, run this stuff on the bottom of this stock pot into a filter and catch it. And then I can just throw it in Aqua Regia and get my gold back, It's a lot easier than everything we're going through for the main stock pot. And there is a fair amount of solids on the bottom there, although I would show it to you, but I got a feeling after I get all this dark green liquid in, they won't be visible anymore. The liquid's rapidly going opaque. Every once in a while, I'll throw a spoonful of SMB into the temporary stock pot too, just to make sure any gold in solution does drop out. Ooh, those I've got to be careful here not to suck up the powder on the bottom. It's quite fine. And the water current from the end of the siphon wants to bring it up. So I've already brought a little bit over. I'm not going to worry about that little bit I've lost, but I don't want to lose more. So, got to be careful, pay attention here. Okay, that's about as good as I can do without sucking up that fine stuff off the bottom. Okay, so let me clean out my siphon hose and we'll move on to the next step. All right, I have transferred the beaker into the fume hood, and I'm just going to put some more uriatic acid on it, stir it around. And I'm going to crack open another gallon here. About that much. And I'm going to give this a good healthy stir. And we're just going to let it sit and settle again. And after that stuff is settled out again, I'm going to siphon off the liquid on top. And I'll just keep this up maybe two more times, and just reduce the amount of copper chloride in there, because that's going to be a bit of a problem later if I don't get rid of it. But I'm not worried about getting rid of all those fine particles in there. I want to keep those. Okay, so we'll just let this sit and settle. All right, so I've rinsed this stuff 3 times now and allowed it to settle. The liquid has gone from a very deep green color to a deep yellow color, which might lead us to believe that we have some precious metals in solution. So let's do a stannous chloride test. This is not my first test. I've been doing them as I go along with the rinsing. I'm not too worried about getting a little bit of precious metals in this liquid, because it's all going right back into my Stockpot, just in case there is a little bit in it. So put a little bit of stannous chloride on it. Okay, I don't know how well that is showing up. Probably not very well for you. All right. That is ever so slightly purple. And as it sits there, it's turning ever so slightly orange. Okay. So, but I mean, it's very, very slight. This is one reason I like the white spoon method, because we're actually looking through a drop that's several millimeters thick, and we can get a better view of the color against the white background of the spoon. If I was doing this on a piece of filter paper, I don't think I'd even be able to see that color. So I'm thinking what this tells me is we have a little bit of gold and maybe a little bit of platinum in this liquid in here, but it's very, very little, not enough to really worry about. So I'm going to siphon this off into my temporary Stockpot, just like I've done before, and then we will move on to dealing with the solids. All right, so just like I've done a couple times before now, only once on camera though, I am going to siphon the liquid off of the solids. And this should be the last time I have to do this. Okay, I think we've got enough of the copper out of here that it's not going to become too much of an issue, at least the copper that's in the liquid fraction here. I think we'll be okay there. There might still be some small bits of solid copper in here we're going to have to deal with. But we have a method for that. So let me get this siphoned off, and we will move on. All right, so now that this has been rinsed 3 times with HCl and allowed to settle and had the bulk of the liquid siphoned off. I stopped while there was still some liquid there because I was just starting to pull up too much of the fine stuff down there. Remember, all the fine particles are still in here. All right, I have not rinsed them out, so all the super fine stuff is still here. So my goal here is to capture the particles in a filter. All right, so that's what I'm doing right here. And I expect this filtration will take a very long time because there are a lot of very fine particles in here. And the filter pores will probably plug up, but that's okay. I can wait all day for this to finish filtering. And I'm using some HCl again to help this stuff out of the beaker and through the filter. Probably ought to be wearing my respirator, but there's a bit of a breeze and I am upwind. Get some stuff off the outside here. That looks pretty darn good. All right. So we'll just let this slowly drain. Get this yellow liquid off of the solids. And I will probably spritz the filter down with a little bit of this stuff once we get the bulk of the liquid through, just to try and get some more crud out of the solids and leave them as clean as possible. And then once we have the solids fairly dry, I'll let the vacuum run for a while and pull as much liquid out of it as I can. And once we have the solids fairly dry, we'll move on to the next step. So while this filtration is going on slowly, I'm wiping out the inside of this beaker with a piece of paper towel and capturing all the remaining black powder stuck to the inside. I will put this with my filters and rags storage and process it the next time I do my filters and rags, because this is definitely precious metals on here, this black stuff. Oh, and the observant among you in the audience may have noticed that the color of the bench top has changed during the course of this video from white to gray. This was a viewer suggestion. A while back, I put out a video on the maintenance I do around the lab regularly, and I'll put a link to that video in the upper right. Check it out if you like. In the beginning of that video, I was repainting the lab bench white. And in the 2 weeks or so it took me to put all the segments of that video together, the lab bench looked like it needed repainting again by then. So, I mean, it had lots of stains, burns, whatnot on it. And one of my viewers suggested, well, why not paint it gray? The gray won't show the stains as well. And I got to thinking, you know what? That's a good idea. Plus, I'm thinking that a lot of my video is way too dark because the camera is metering on the white bench top, and that makes everything sitting on the bench darker. So I'm thinking that the gray is giving me better metering on the camera. Yeah, the outside there where the sun's shining is really overexposed, but this is looking pretty good on the viewfinder. We'll see how it looks in editing. So I'm thinking gray's better for videoing too, and hopefully won't show the stains. We'll find out. Anyway, I'm just going to let this filter. Well, there's the black powder caught in the filter. I left the vacuum running for about an hour while I went in and had some lunch. So we've got the liquid off of it. It looks like some of the really fine particles managed to go through the filter and they're down in here. That's okay. I think we still captured the vast bulk of the material in this filter. Okay. So the liquid down here is going to go right back in my stock pot along with whatever fine powders have accumulated down in here. Okay, so what's next? Let me reposition the camera and we'll see if we can do this. This is a lot of material, more than I was expecting. I think I said that earlier. So we'll see if I can make this work. So what I really want to do here is get this material into this melt dish. But I don't know, there might be too much here. Yeah. The filter's falling apart. Okay. Yeah, the filter is falling apart. Maybe I can stuff this all in the melt dish. Yeah, I guess it'll go. Okay. Of course, I've got the black stuff on my hands now. I will wipe my hands with a piece of paper towel and put that with my rag and filter storage. All right. Yeah, so that's got to go in storage because that's precious metals. Yeah, there's more here than I thought. I need to process my stock pot in a more timely manner. Clearly. All right. So next, what's the next step? You might be asking yourself for this mud down here. Well, it's pure hoke. Okay. She says ignite this in a muffle furnace. Basically, put it in a muffle furnace and get it good and hot. Don't melt it though. Don't melt it. But get it hot enough. We're going to burn off any organics in here, including the paper. We're going to get rid of any volatiles. And also, she talks about oxidizing the iridium so that it does not go into solution later when you put aqua regia on it, because iridium is very hard to deal with. You want to leave it as a solid. I don't know if we have any iridium in here or not, but we are going to follow her advice on this. And we're going to put this, I don't have a muffle furnace, but I do have my home-built Capelling furnace, which should do pretty much the same job. So let's just get this in the Capelling furnace and get it going. So here's my home-built Capelling furnace, which I have a whole series of videos on. I'll put a link in the upper right to the playlist on this, or at least the first video. I can't remember if I made a playlist on it or not. So we're going to put this in here. And I'm going to leave the door cracked open a little bit to let the volatiles escape. And we'll turn this thing on. And it is set to 910C. And we'll just let this come up to temperature. Oh yeah, we're already up over 200 degrees and still rising. I may put on my respirator when it comes time to pull this stuff out, just because there might be some vaporized heavy metals there to deal with. And if you're wondering about the name, if you watch the series of videos where I built this thing, I had a contest to name it. And I got two really good names. I couldn't decide between them. So it became Furnace of Truth, a.k.a. Mike's Easy Bake Oven. So it has two names. Goes either way. Doesn't care what you call it, just don't call it late for dinner. Okay, so we'll just let this cook, coming up to temperature good. I really hope it doesn't rain. Suddenly we got dark clouds moving in. And I've got this thing set up outside, just so I don't have to deal with any nasty vapors indoors. I suppose I can throw a big sheet of plywood over the top of it or something if it starts raining. Hopefully it won't rain hard, won't do more than sprinkle. Hopefully it won't sprinkle at all. Okay, we'll just let it go. Okay, it's been maybe 20 minutes. It's getting really hot in there. Temperature just short of 600 C. Let's have a quick peek inside. Standing well back so as not to breathe any of those fumes coming out of there. Yeah, it's shrinking in volume, which is good. Exactly what I wanted. And it's going to be drying out and oxidizing any iridium in there. So it's exactly what we want to do. I'm going to let it go until it gets up to as hot as it'll get. And we'll see what we've got after that. Hopefully all of the paper will be ashed away to nothing. And we'll have a lot less volume of material to deal with. Because that was a lot of material. I was thinking once it dried out, it would shrink up a lot. And I think that's what's happening. Okay, so we're just going to let it go. Almost back up to 600 after opening the door for a bit. So we're getting there. Okay, it's been, I guess, an hour or so, and we are at 906, 907, 905. It's bouncing around. It's right about at the set point I set for it, which was 910 degrees C, over 16 something Fahrenheit. So I think we've probably done a pretty good job on this stuff. We stalled out at about 800 something until I closed and latched the door. Then we got up the rest of the way. But by then the worst of the smoke had stopped. So I think we're probably done. I don't want to leave it in there too long because there is a chance of some of the precious metals vaporizing away. in spite of their boiling points being so high, they will vaporize. It's very weird. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this off. I am going to go get my respirator on, and we'll open it up, and we'll pull it out and see what it looks like. Okay, so here we go. Let's have a look. Yeah, there was a possibility of vaporized metals here. Yeah, I'm wearing my respirator. Well, it's glowing bright orange. That's all we got left. Pull that out and let it cool down. Yeah, it's not too sintered up. I might have to run it through my mortar and pestle to break it up before we do anything further with it, but I'm pretty happy with that. It looks like it's pretty well baked. Okay, so I'm gonna let this cool down. I'll let this cool down. I hear thunder in the distance. Hopefully this will cool down enough to put away before any rain comes. And I'll move this up out of harm's way in the lab. Alrighty, so after all this effort, here's our prize. Still very, very hot. I think it's glowing down underneath there. Yeah, it is. I don't know if that's showing up. Glowing red down there. So this needs to cool off, and then we will process it further. But I think that'll be in the next video. This video was just getting the stuff, and you saw what we went through to get it. Now that we got it, next video we'll start processing it. Want to get the gold and want to see how much of the platinum group metals we have in here this time around. See if it's enough to bother with trying to recover, or just dump it back in the stockpot so it can continue to accumulate. So we'll see you in the next video. So if you found this video at all interesting, educational, informative, whatever, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to see those future videos. There may be one or more videos on processing this, along with a lot of other gold and silver recovery videos coming down the pike. Okay, I'm going to put this in the fume hood because it's getting really thundery and windy, and I think it's going to start raining, and I don't want any of this precious dust to be blown away. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks a lot for watching this one. Bye.